All right, good morning, everybody. And I think we'll get started. We might have some people coming into the room a little bit late, but want to be respectful of everybody's time this morning here in Ontario. I know it might be different times other places in the world for everyone. My name is Leah McCormick Smith, and I am the Dean of Students here at New College. And so my role here is really to help support the outside the classroom experience for students, including residence pieces, co-curricular engagements, all of that good stuff. And I'm going to turn it over to Carrie Huffman, who is going to take us through a little bit of our agenda in the first couple of pieces.
Great. Thank you so much, Leah, and welcome everybody. We're so glad that you're able to join us this morning. I'm going to start off with a land acknowledgement for the university. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. And welcome everybody to our morning session on how to support your new college student. Usually we're on campus. Well, for this year and last year, of course, we've been virtual. But typically we have our welcome events on campus. And I think one of the benefits of moving to a virtual format is that a lot of people can join us who normally wouldn't have an opportunity to come to campus. So maybe, as Leah said, it's morning in Toronto. It may not be where you are. But if you'd like to, if you're comfortable putting in the chat where you're joining us from, we'd be really curious to know where people are dialing in from. Welcome, and hopefully we'll be able to provide you with helpful information that's going to help you support your student while they're at New College. So just sort of to go through a little bit what we're going to be covering today. We are going to talk a little bit about the transition into university learning, that academic transition, and of course the personal and social transition in as well. So we're going to talk about the kinds of supports and resources that are available, and what kinds of expectations there are going to be in terms of the academic and the personal piece. We're going to talk a little bit about our privacy policy that we have here, and really where the key resources on campus are and at New College are. What I'll maybe talk a little bit about is I'm the registrar, which for many of you may not be a very familiar term. I think a little bit about the registrar's office as being sort of similar in some ways to a guidance counselor's office at high school. We say that it's the best first stop for students to come to ask questions, right? So right now your students, they probably know where to go to get help. They're coming from high school in most cases, and they're probably right now in an online learning environment, maybe not. But what we're really aiming for this fall is to return to campus. And so what we really want is to be able to provide you guys with a little bit of information so that you can help them navigate the campus and the services. So that's probably, I would say, the biggest takeaway that we want you guys to have is to know kind of how you can guide your students through some of the best places to find resources, because U of T is a really, really big place. And one of the things about being at U of T is that there's a ton of services available, but sometimes it's hard to figure out how do you access those services. So the one thing that I will say is that both Leah's office, the Office of Student and Resident Life, and the registrar's office are the primary places where students will find resources, supports, and just generally answers to questions that they're going to have, of which, of course, when you come in as a new student, there's going to be many on that. Okay, and so Alex, if we can just move forward into the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about what when students are starting university, what are the things that they're really thinking about when they're coming in as first year students, right? And so there's kind of three big things that students are excited and maybe a little bit apprehensive about. And it's, will I make friends? Will I do well academically? Will I be successful after I graduate, right? The job piece. You guys might be thinking about that too. So one of the things about coming to university and making that transition uh, away from high school is that for most of your students, they have a solid friend group. They may have had that solid friend group all the way through high school. And most of them are going to be going to different institutions. I see a lot of you are joining us from all over the world. These are students who are going to be coming in some cases to a campus in a city that they haven't been before. They may know one or two people on campus, but they're going to be starting a new chapter of their lives at the university, and they're going to be starting to make friends, right? So that's going to be a pretty big change for them. And Leah's going to talk a little bit about some of the supports available that have already started. So our Sprout e-newsletter has brought together our first year students already with an upper year student as a mentor. The friend piece, obviously, people want to be able to make friends. U of T can be a big campus, but there's lots of ways to make those social connections. And then the other piece, of course, is, will I do well academically, right? And that, of course, students who come to U of T are the best students around the world. So most students who come into U of T, they have been very successful in high school. Sometimes they've been able to be very successful in high school with relative ease, right? It has their really bright and dedicated students, and getting those top grades has been something that they're very accustomed to. And so one of the things that they may find a transition is that academic expectation transition. And this is really sort of where we shift a little bit from the high school model, where it's a teaching centered model in terms of teachers are teaching the students, and that's they're making sure students are understanding the work. And in university, it's much more of a students need to drive the academic piece. And we'll talk a little bit about sort of what resources are available to help support that transition. And then, of course, the other piece is, will I be successful after graduation, right? Students come to U of T with usually quite specific programs or majors in mind, areas that they want to study, with the goal of maybe going on to grad school for further study, or very specific career goals in mind. That's most often the case. And what's going to happen is they come into U of T. We have like 300 different programs that students can explore. And so sometimes that exploration means that they're going to be thinking about possibly different career paths, possibly different areas of study than what they originally came in. And that's okay. It's the Faculty of Arts and Science, which means that students have a whole range from the arts all the way over to the hard sciences, computer science, and everything in between that they can choose from in terms of the areas of study. So maybe what we can do is talk a little bit about the academic piece and supporting students around how to make that transition into what's going to be a different learning model. And Alex, maybe you can just flip ahead to the next. Perfect. Thank you so much. So one of the things, as I mentioned, the university structure is a different structure in terms of the learning model. It's a very self-driven educational model, and students really need to make that transition to become a deliberate and purposeful learner, right? So that's maybe going to be the biggest transition. There's going to be lots of transitions this year. Maybe since you guys have been so kind to put some information about where you're from and dialing in from today, maybe you can put a little bit of information about whether learning in your area for high school students, has it been online? Has it been in person? What sort of changes have been there? I have a teenage son. He's been pretty much in Toronto. We've been online all year. So there may be some real differences in terms of transitioning back into the classroom and being used to that in-person learning, which I will say we're really looking forward to being back on campus. But one of the things for students to really think about is what do they need to do to be able to flourish academically at the university, right? So really, the big thing is, one of the biggest things that happens for new incoming students is it's at a pace that they're not accustomed to. So, our classes, most courses are half courses, which means that they get a half credit in the fall term. The entire class happens in a 12-week period. And in that time, things go by very quickly. The expectation of instructors and what we recommend to students is usually that for every hour you're in a lecture or in the class, you're spending 3 hours outside of the class preparing. So that's either reading, working on assignments, preparing for exams and tests, that sort of thing. So it's a lot of outside of that shift to moving to outside of the classroom academic work can often be a bit of a transition for students. One of the things that first year students inevitably say when they come in to see me is, I didn't know it was going to go so fast, right? And that's one of the places where often there's a little bit of a reset at the start of the second term to really adjust to the pace of university learning, because it's often quite a lot quicker than high school learning is. The other piece that really is something that students in first year need to learn is around time management and organizing their time. And part of that is because, usually in high school, students go to school sort of like 9 to 3:30 or 8:30 to 3. But their classes are within a fairly constrained amount of time. That may be the case depending on how students build their timetable, but it could be different, right? It could be that they have a math lecture at 9 in the morning, and a history lecture from 1 to 3 in the afternoon, and then they might have another class that runs from 6 to 9. And so they may have gaps in the day. And that's where one of the pieces around time management becomes really important, which is how do you structure your day around some of these gaps? Or you may have a free day. When I was in my final year of university, I only had classes on Tuesday to Thursday. So I had 2 days of the week that were just completely free. And I had to learn how to use that time really well. So those are sort of the big things that students really have to adjust to. But the thing is that we've got great supports and resources available for students. And I really, really encourage students to take advantage of those right from the very beginning of the start of their first year, if not sooner. And so in terms of the kinds of resources that are available at the college, there are a number of academic support sessions that are offered through our student life and our registrar's office, as well as through our writing center. So the writing center is a great place for students to go for a variety of sessions, but also one-on-one work with a writing instructor to work on essays, reports, that sort of thing. Our library is fantastic. We have 3 amazing librarians, and they will do one-on-one personal librarian appointments. And this is a great thing for students to do in their first year, because the way that the research materials are available at the university is a little different from what it would have been in high school. There's a lot of electronic resources, databases, and research databases for them to be able to tap into. A half hour at the start of the term with one of our librarians to learn how to navigate that can be super helpful. The other piece is that we also have a full-time learning strategist with the college. And Elizabeth is someone who also gives a series of sessions on things like time management, exam prep, study skills, note taking, a whole range of things, but also meets one-on-one with students and works on developing specific skills that are going to be tailored and helpful for students. She meets with them across all years of study, but I really, really encourage first year students to meet with her as early as possible. So there's lots and lots of supports that are available. And that's the one thing that I really want to make sure students and students know about, is that all of these are available. They're easy to access when you know they're there, right? That's the big piece. So that I think is one of the most important pieces around helping support the academic side of the transition in. The other piece, of course, is that they're going to be working with professors who are among the top researchers in the world and top experts in their field, as well as TAs. So our TAs are a teaching assistant, and they usually are doctoral students in the program who run smaller tutorials for students to review material, to really dive into things, to be able to ask questions. And the instructors and TAs are the experts that students can go to for the sort of discipline specific support, and establishing some of those relationships right away is really, really important. And then of course, the other thing about coming to U of T is that there may be a change in grades, right? Everybody who comes into U of T is an A student out of high school. So everybody admitted into the university. Some of our admission streams, the cutoff may have been an 85%. For some others, it's almost a 95. So these are really top students. And when students come into first year, at the end of first year, about 30% are still A students, right? So what that means is that students may end up experiencing a change in their grades. And that can be a difficult thing for students to work their way through, right? They're used to their identity being a stellar academic student, and they may feel like they've taken a little bit of a hit. And this is a place where you can really support them. One of the things that you know, at U of T is that a C grade is an average solid grade, right? It means that students are learning the material, they are, you know, they're doing well in the course. So one of the pieces that I really encourage students to think about, and maybe one of the things that you guys as the supports for students can think about, is where are you in relation to the class average, right? And really where you want to be sitting is at the class average. If you're above the class average, that's great. One of the things that I'm going to say, of course, is that first year is a transition year, right? So students may find first year a little bit bumpy. What we find, particularly once students get into third and fourth year, and they're really in the midst of in their majors and the subjects that they're really excited about, there's always a progression up. And we really usually see that the grades for students really, really improve going into third and fourth year when they get really focused on the area of study. So that could be a little bit of something to expect in first year, that grades could change, that there may be maybe feeling a little bit uncertain about where they are. But it is absolutely normal for that. And really, as I say, once students really get the swing of things, they really start to improve on that. The other thing to think about is that students may end up changing direction a little bit, right? So when I came into university, I was going to be a poli-sci major. That was my whole thing. And then, you know, we read Machiavelli and I thought, maybe not. And then I thought, maybe I'll do philosophy. That's what I'm going to do. And then we read Plato and I thought, maybe not. And I sort of worked my way around and found the programs of study. So that's another thing to think about. Students may come in and they may have a very specific idea about what they want to study. And then in their first year, they may explore around a little bit. And what they may do is they may think, you know, I maybe came in to do biology, but what I've discovered is that I really like this other program over here. So that's one of the things that could potentially be happening. The other piece is that they're going to start discovering a whole range of career options out there. And that may change the direction they go a little bit with what they're looking for in terms of their programs. But the thing is, there's lots of options available. And really the core learning outcomes from the university at the Faculty of Arts and Science are around critical thinking and research skills, collaborative learning, and communication, both in terms of written skills and presentation skills. So that's one of the pieces that you know, whatever the program is that students come away with, they're really going to come away with solid skills that they can take into their that they can take out into the work world afterwards. So I'm going to hand it over to Leah to talk a little bit about sort of the personal supports and additional academic supports that are available.
Thank you. So I'm here to talk a little bit about how to help students succeed personally. And we know that that is one of the other things that students are going to be really concerned about when it is they start with us here. And so the first thing is importance of involvement outside the classroom. And so we really do believe that that in-class experience is very important. And obviously, as Carrie talked about, there are sort of different ways of learning here that students are really going to have to think about, and that not all of that work is happening in the classroom. In fact, the majority of it is not. The majority of it is happening when they go home. They'll go in for a lecture, they need to do readings, they need to do assignments. But with that, it's also really important that they're thinking sort of beyond the 4 years and what it is they're doing with the rest of it. And so that means doing things like building resume experience and also building relationships and networking with other supports. And this can come in a variety of ways. For some folks, that does mean looking for paid positions, and that could come in the form of work study positions or other on-campus jobs. But it also could come in the form of things like research opportunities. And even if we're thinking about things like student council and elected positions, I've had lots of students before say to me, well, I mean, does being on a student council count? And when we think about the student councils at the U of T, these are autonomous student organizations that hold relatively large budgets, often budgets over $100,000, and spend their year managing that money on behalf of their constituents or all the elected members of the college. And so, of course, that requires real work and knowledge and experience and is great experience at the end of it. And so part of the role of my office is also to help students figure out how it is they're going to convey those pieces so that employers would really understand that afterwards. But in that 4 years, using sort of somewhat limited time, and I think for a lot of students, we think 10 to 12 hours of involvement outside of the classroom is usually more than enough. And particularly in those first few years, we would want students to really think about that importance of balance and not overcommitting or overextending themselves, but that it is important to kind of think about those pieces of building as you have the time now. That's going to be important for grad school applications and can really set people apart. It's also going to be important if they're going to be looking for work experience afterwards. Degrees are fantastic and wonderful, and they get you lots of things. However, they don't always lead to really practical experience. And so part of what my office is seeking to do is to take that theoretical learning that they're doing in the classroom and really help them find that practical experience to map it onto so that they're prepared for the next steps. One of the other things you can do is encourage balance during peak periods. And so when we think about things like midterms and finals, it breaks my heart every year when I hear students say, particularly in a typical year, I've just spent the last 30 hours in the library studying, so I am ready for my exam. I don't believe anybody writes an exam well if they have not slept for 30 hours. And unfortunately, it's just a very common piece. Like Carrie said, there is sometimes real challenge with students figuring out how to kind of balance and allot their time, particularly when they're living alone for the first time. And I see that many people are coming from well outside of Ontario, and so probably looking at students moving into residence or living on their own outside of campus. And so it becomes really important then to help them figure out how to balance their time when they have a little bit more control over what that looks like. Now, that does mean that sometimes those sort of schedules will change. I know that when my brother went to university, him and I developed very opposite schedules where I'm a very much morning person. And so I joked that my brain shut off at 9 o'clock and it didn't work, but I could definitely get up at 6 a.m. and work on an assignment if I needed to. That mornings were good for me. My brother took all late classes and he liked to get up at noon and he would go to bed at like 3 because that was just the schedule that worked for him. In both cases, we both felt I'm getting enough sleep and I have some balance. It's just the way that my timetable works for me is a little bit different. But it is also important that they think about things like seeing friends, going to the gym, going out for a walk, engaging in other activities. Because the other thing that we know during those peak periods is that is a point where mental health can really suffer, particularly if students are really not filling the other parts of themselves. We also know that the learning is not as great if all they are doing is sitting in front of their work and doing nothing but schoolwork. The brain also needs to relax so that it can put stuff into long-term memory. So it's really important for them to actually take time away from the books. That sometimes if you're writing a paper or you're trying to get a concept, the brain will actually do better if you go and you do something else and it can do some of that figuring in the background. Um, and so really it's important to sort of think about those balance pieces. And then if you hear your child talking about, I spent the last 30 hours in the library, or all I'm doing is studying right now, that it might be good to suggest go for a walk, go see a friend, go have dinner in the cafeteria, take an hour, take some time away to really kind of help them both academically and personally. And then the other thing that becomes really important is encouraging autonomy here. And so one of the things that becomes really important when students come to the U of T is no matter what their age is in terms of their relationship with places like my office, we see them as an adult. They are the ones who hold sort of the rights to their student file. Um, and sometimes things happen during the year where a student is really going to need to do some self advocacy. And they're going to need to come in and talk to somebody, whether that's somebody in my office or somebody in Carrie's office. And sometimes it can be helpful if parents are kind of cueing us into things. I've definitely had emails from parents where they've said, I think my child is struggling right now, and I would appreciate if somebody could reach out to them. Carrie is going to talk a little bit about FIPA, which is a privacy law in Ontario. But we cannot provide any information back to anybody contacting us on the student's behalf. We can only provide information about a student file to the student. And so it can be really helpful to help them learn to self-advocate in those moments. And I want you to know that we will always treat that with kindness. I know that for a lot of students, it becomes a little bit anxiety inducing, the idea of coming to somebody that they are seeing in an authority position to ask for something or to request something or to have to face a challenge with us. And so we do treat that with kindness, but we also see that really as part of the learning goal for students here. Often for a lot of students, they are coming to us directly from their family home, and they may be going to living independently at the end of their first year or at the end of their full 4 years here at U of T. And so one of the things that we want to do is help them do that self-advocacy, because they're definitely going to have to do that outside of the university. And so it can be really helpful to encourage your student. But I do remember my brother, when he went to university, he did not get the residence that he wanted. And at the time, the residences that were offered, some of them were considered dry residences. My brother was of age of majority. He already did drink socially with his friends. And he said, I have now been assigned a residence where I'm not even allowed to bring in beer. And I'm upset about that. And my parents' response to that was, well, that's too bad. And you could call the university and you can see if you can make a switch. But if you can't make a switch, how are you just going to make the best of it? And I think in that moment, it was a good moment for my brother, because what it did was it meant that he needed to think about how he wanted to solve the problem. No one was going to solve that problem for him. And so, really, what we want to do is help students to feel like they can solve the problem. And they should do it with us, where there's a safety net when things don't go great. We will check in, we will support them, we will help them with self advocating. But we want to make sure that they leave with that skill set. All right, I will turn it back over to Carrie for a conversation about FIPPA. So, if Alex, you could switch to the next slide.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Leah. And actually, just because you did touch on one thing when you were reviewing some of the supports through your office, you had mentioned sort of research opportunities, and I did just want to talk a little bit about before we get to the FIPPA stuff, a little bit about the range of research opportunities, community engaged learning opportunities, and even professional experience here. So there is for students, usually this is in their upper years of study, although for some second year students, there are research opportunities. But one of the great benefits at being at a research institution, and a large research institution, is that many students have an opportunity to engage in research type courses. And these usually are actual 4-credit courses that students can take, and they take on a research role. And usually it's a larger research project where they're working with faculty members. Sometimes they're working with graduate students or postdocs, but they're able actually to engage in research. And it runs the gamut from humanities courses all the way through to being in a wet lab somewhere, or working with computer science on developing maybe software. So there's a whole range of opportunities that are out there. The other piece, we at New College have a community engaged learning program. And essentially what that is, it is again a 4-credit course where students have an opportunity to go out and work with one of our community partners. And it's a great, it not only counts for credit towards their degree studies, but it's also a great learning and career preparation opportunity as well. To a lesser extent, there's some professional experience year opportunities. These sort of tend to be a little bit more around the computer science area, but students have an opportunity to step out from their studies for a year and go work full time with one of the university partners. So all of these opportunities are great things for students to engage in. They get an additional set of career ready skills, and they have an opportunity to be able to kind of explore what the work world is going to be like, or what those extended research opportunities are going to be like. And often that drives some decisions going forward in terms of what the next steps are going to be. One of the students who that I worked with a couple of years ago, when she was in 4th year, had a very intensive research opportunity in a lab. And she was a fantastic student. And at the end of the year, she had an offer to a med school and had an offer into a direct entry doctoral program. And she actually, this is maybe going to sound surprising to many parents, she chose the doctoral research program because what she decided in that year was that that was really where her passion was. So these can be really great opportunities and really open doors for students. So lots of opportunities there. Really want students to explore those opportunities. Anyway, as Leah said, she mentioned a little bit about the privacy on campus in terms of privacy constraints that that are in place. And they're sort of twofold. One, as Leah mentioned, there is a Ontario provincial law that is the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Before this came into play, the university had a privacy policy anyway, but because this is a provincial law, it supersedes that policy. And essentially what that means in terms of our offices and handling student records is that we are not permitted to disclose or release any information about a student without specific permission from that student. And usually we do ask for that in writing. And essentially, what that means is that their academic and financial and personal records are confidential. And so we can't, without permission, disclose information about, you know, have all of the fees been paid for this year? What are marks? When, what courses are a student registered in? Those are things that we can't disclose. And the other piece is that it also holds true within the university context. So we share information with partners only on a need to know information basis. So the student file that primarily resides in the registrar's office is a private file that stays within our office unless there's information that needs to be shared. So in the context of the university and academics, basically what it means is that we don't share information externally and only on a need to know basis within the university. But that doesn't mean that you can't contact us if you have concerns, if you have questions. Staff in my office, staff in Leah's office are happy to talk about and give you information about the things we can give information about. So, you may think, or you may give Leah's office a call because your student is living in residence. And it used to be that you talk to your student every day, and all of a sudden it's been almost a week and you haven't heard from them, right? And you may be worried about that. They are probably busy in classes, enjoying campus, exploring the city, and just kind of have forgotten, right? But if you get in touch with our offices and you say you're concerned, we can't provide you information about what that student's been up to, but we might be able to sort of connect with that student and let them know that there are some concerns that you have about them. But the other piece is that often when I'm working with parents, it's more about having a conversation about what are the appropriate supports or what are the appropriate resources that can be made available to the student to support them in whatever it is that they're experiencing. So, if a student is having some difficulty with their classes, or they're finding that they're having a little bit of a hurdle with their first round of tests, then our recommendation would be have them come in and meet with one of the academic advisors in the registrar's office, and we could make the appropriate referrals there. Or, would we make a referral to, you may wonder, are there healthcare supports on campus? And we could provide information about what those healthcare supports are and how a student would access them. So I think that the most important thing is that we're here to provide sort of general information and make sure that you have a picture of what's available on campus, but obviously we're not going to be able to provide specific information about the student. Leah, did you want to add anything about sort of the context of residence or residence life?
No, I think you covered a lot of it. I think what people can expect is if they call us with a concern, really, based under the Privacy Act, we can't even confirm if a student lives in residence with us to anybody external to the residence. And so if somebody called with a concern, what would often happen is we would take down the information. And if the student lived with us, that we go and make contact with the student and ask for them to call home. But we can't confirm or deny that they're there. And we can't also provide an update if we're able to reach them. For everyone's peace of mind, we do take that stuff very seriously, though, and so we do always try to make contact. We're also in contact with all of the other residences on campus, and so if somebody gets the wrong residence, because there's a lot of us and we all have different numbers, we will still try and track down where that student might be, which building, and relay that message to other staff to ensure that that gets passed along and that we connect with the student to ask them to reach out. So I know that that's not always very satisfying for parents, particularly when you're worried. But to know that we do take that very seriously, and we're concerned about the well-being of all of our students. And so if we're getting people connecting with us saying that they're worried, we always want to make sure that we've had an opportunity to chat with the student to make sure that things are okay.
Great. Thanks, Leah. And just being mindful of time, maybe we can talk a little bit about the resources on campus, which is a little, we're going to probably get a little bit more detailed into our own offices. And then I want to make sure that we've got a little bit of time for you guys to ask questions, because I'm sure you've got questions for this year coming up. But I did want to just have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about sort of the registrar's office and the kinds of things that we do in the registrar's office in terms of the range of services that are available. And so, you know, we have a frontline operation, and those student service assistants are there for those sort of quick questions, like quick information, what are deadlines for certain things. And then we also have a team of academic advisors who meet one-on-one with students. Usually that's a half-hour meeting. And those appointments can cover a range of things. And so, you know, usually for new incoming students, just so that you're aware in terms of some of the things we're offering over the summer is a series of Ask an Advisor sessions. And those sessions are primarily geared towards course enrollment so that students can ask questions about how do I go about picking courses. Then there's also a resource page that they have been added to where there's a range of videos that they can review for course enrollment. So in those one-on-one meetings, a lot of the discussions, particularly over the summer for students of all years, is around course enrollment, program selection, a lot of that stuff around getting ready for fall. And then during the course of the year, a lot of those discussions are a little bit more specific to the academic piece. So often they are about specific courses. But the other piece is, and this is where you guys can help us out, is that if a student has something that's impacting their academic progress or is impacting their academic ability, really what we want is for them to come and see us, and we can work with the student and see what the possibilities are. And so I'll just give a for instance, sometimes students, depending on what's happening during the year, they may have to move, right? So I've worked with students who they might be living with a roommate and the landlord has sold the house and they have to move in the middle of the year. When you're a student, moving is really disruptive. It means packing all your stuff up. It means looking for a new place, getting yourself all set up. Sometimes you don't have any control over when that's going to happen, right? Especially if it's something like out of your control when you have to move. But what it might mean is that move is going to take place at a time when, say, a paper is due in a course. That is a great opportunity for a student to come in, meet with an academic advisor, have a discussion about what's happening. And then what we would do is we would write to the instructor on the student's behalf and ask for an extension of time for, say, that written assignment. So those kinds of things that may come up, a student might get sick and miss a range of midterms. That's another point where they can come in and we can work with them around negotiating with the instructor. The other piece that we do is sort of financial aid and assistance pieces. So for students who may have some unexpected expenses, they can apply for a grant through the college, and we would meet with them and review the grant application form and assess whether they're eligible for some financial support. And then the other piece is that we're the best first stop, because we're so central, to really help students with things like referrals to other kinds of resources on campus, or connecting them with other supports or other student groups or other opportunities. And the same would hold for Leah's office as well. So just really want to make sure that you guys know that our offices are the best resources available for students. That's the work we do. We meet with students one-on-one. We want to support them and guide them through their academic journey. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that Leah has put in the chat, the link to some of the resources that are that appear on the slide. So the new students guide and the parents guide has information about the resources available at New College, general information about New College, and we've also included some information or a link to the COVID-19 FAQs that are available centrally through the university. That's a really, really good place for you to be able to go for the most up-to-date information about a range of things related to COVID. And I know that lots of us are going to be having questions about that over the summer. That's a place where it's being updated, particularly whenever there's changes to provincial or federal quarantine regulations or that sort of thing. The university does have a quarantine protocol in place, and that may be helpful for students who are coming into Canada over the summer. So I want to encourage you guys to, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. Leah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about sort of the resources, a little bit about your office, or any information about some of those resources that have been added to our slide today.
I think since we've got 10 minutes left, I'm happy. I think Carrie covered a lot of it. I would just want to point again to the COVID-19 in campus guidelines from the Vice Provost students. A lot of the policies that we're working with, both in the residence and exterior to that on campus, are really being run through that COVID-19 committee through the Vice Provost students at U of T. Not all questions, particularly if there's specific questions around vaccination statuses and other things, and I know for folks coming into residence, that's probably very front of mind right now, are answered through the FAQ, but there is a contact us section through there that will go as an email to an actual person who is going to write you back. And so if you do have really specific questions about your particular set of circumstances, it would be most helpful to send them to them. We are happy to guide that process in any way that we can. But because it is not a New College policy, we actually don't interpret the policy. The policy, particularly around vaccination status, is being managed through central offices and through our Health and Wellness Center as well. And so we do refer those questions on to that group to make sure that the best information is being given to anybody asking it. And so with that, maybe I will turn it over. Is there anybody who has any questions based on the presentation or other things that are on your mind? So how is move-in day managed, and will students be asked to minimize what they bring in the first day? Yes, they will be asked to minimize the stuff that they bring in the first day. We will be asking students as much as possible to bring what they anticipate needing for the first few weeks, if it is possible for them to retrieve other things later. We know that's not necessarily the case for everybody. We have just received revised occupancy guidelines for the upcoming year. And so for anybody on this call who might be waiting for an offer, that's exciting news, because we do anticipate we'll be able to make another bulk of offers this coming Tuesday on the next offer day, which we were not sure we were going to be able to do prior to that point. In terms of the move-in day being managed, there will be more information sent out probably in the next month or so that people are prepared. But we will be asking people to book a time for that move-in, and so everybody will be given a window, and that is to ensure that we don't have everybody arriving at the same time. Right now, what we are trying to determine is whether or not that move-in can happen in one day, or if we'll need to look at two, and some of that will be dependent on international student arrival, and particularly out of quarantine. And so there's still some other things at play there, but we will be giving everybody sort of the best guidance we can. We will also be asking people to limit the amount of help that they are bringing with them to 2 people. And that is to ensure that, again, we can maintain physical distancing and sort of safety in residence. The last offer date. So that is not the last offer day. We have 2 more rounds left, and so the next round is this upcoming Tuesday, and then the following Tuesday there will be another round of offers. After that, so those are the pre-agreed upon rounds for all of U of T, and so all of the residences are making offers on the same schedule. After that, we will be doing offers sort of as we have rooms become available. So people can take a look, and if the offer comes on the Tuesday, students will have until the following Monday to pay their deposit and confirm that offer. How much of a problem is theft from residence rooms? Are students able to lock up items like computers and musical instruments in closets? Student rooms are private and they are locked. I would say if students leave their rooms unlocked, then they probably are taking a risk. But no, we don't have a real theft problem in residence because students are in single rooms that are locked to them. We do encourage students to remember that if they are going to the bathroom or they're going to the common room or they are leaving their room for any length of time, that they do take their keys and lock their door. Um, but the best place for them to leave valuables is in their own room.
And just to add on to that, Leah, sorry, before you move on, is I was going to just sort of say with that, usually often we, in the registrar's office, we may see a student who has had their laptop stolen and they might need some financial assistance to replace it. And inevitably what's happened is that the student has either been at the library or they've been in a student common space and they've gone to the bathroom and left the laptop just sitting out in the open. So I think the piece is we're in Toronto, it's a big city, and to be cautious about your belongings when you're in common spaces and open spaces.
Yeah. The question about will dollies or moving carts be available? The answer to that is yes. We will have a limited number of dollies and moving carts available. Again, we would encourage students to come with the things they need. And we will be sending suggested packing lists as we get a little bit closer. One of the other things that is always helpful to consider when students are arriving, this past year, we did not have refrigerators available in the common rooms. I am not sure if that is going to change for the upcoming year. Students are permitted to either purchase or rent a mini fridge, and we will be sending out specs for what the size limitation on that is. But I do encourage people to at least consider that as an option. I think for students, it makes things a little more comfortable. You can have, some of your own leftovers or drinks or things like that in your own room. And the cooking facilities in residence will still be available through the common room. However, there are capacity limits, so people will want to sort of take that into consideration. But there is a microwave and a stove if people want to reheat things that they are bringing from elsewhere. But we would really encourage people to sort of limit to the sort of necessities. And we do have rentals, and those rentals are actually delivered to the student room prior to move in. I'm going to turn the next question over to Carrie. How do students typically take notes during a lecture?
Yeah, thanks. And I would say it sort of depends, and sometimes it depends on the instructor. So I would say that sort of generally most students have a laptop or they might have a tablet where they take notes. Some students still do old-fashioned handwritten notes. There are instructors who it sort of ranges. Some instructors, they don't care whether a student has a laptop or they're working off of a laptop. I think it depends a little bit about the size and the sort of setup of the class. Some instructors do not permit laptops. It's very distracting. Students tend not to be paying attention to the class. So it sort of depends. I would say more and more, it's kind of a general type of thing that, yeah, students would have a laptop that they would take to class and take notes from.
Okay, so if a student does not receive an offer, then what do they need to do for housing? If a student does not receive an offer from us off of their housing guarantee, we will be sending an email out at the point that we are releasing any records we currently hold back to central housing, and there will be information in there about the next steps. The housing guarantee is a guarantee that they will receive housing through the University of Toronto, but not necessarily at their preferred residence. And so at that point, U of T student housing will be assisting in kind of putting the rest of those offers out into available spaces on campus. Will there be a different move-in day for international students and specifically who have to do a quarantine? We do anticipate that starting around August 1st, that some of our international students will need to come in and do a quarantine. Obviously, that information is evolving right now, particularly with the changes to border regulations around entry. And so there may be some modified early move-in dates. Students would be required to pay for that early arrival to a residence that is not covered as part of the fall winter residence fee. We have a separate fee for summer. But the best thing to do is once you're starting to think about your plans for arrival, to connect with the Center for International Experience and also the Office of the Vice Provost Students and Student Housing, particularly if quarantine is going to be a part of that, and they will assist with those specific questions and then also with that transition to the home residence where available. If a student already has a residence offer, when will they hear about room assignments, and are double rooms being used? Double rooms are being used, and so we so far have had students requesting doubles, and we've had a fairly healthy request for double rooms. But we will be placing students in double rooms this year as part of our complement. And part of that is in alignment with the idea that vaccinations are required to live in residence for the upcoming year. If they have a residence offer already, when will they hear about a room assignment? Not until the second deposit has been paid after August 1st. And so students will get confirmation around their room assignments sometime in probably mid-August. More information about drinking policies and rules. I'm going to pop into the chat the link to the residence occupancy agreement and code of behavior. That is where all of the rules in reference to residents are available. Are there enough nutritious options available for vegetarian students in the dining hall? So yes, we do have both vegan and vegetarian options available daily. And so as part of that, we do have a nutritionist available through U of T Food Services. If you connected with Nikki through the residence office, she can connect you with food services if you have any particular dietary considerations that you would like to chat with them about, and they can help walk you through what the anticipated menus would look like.
And I'm going to say I'm a vegetarian, and I've always had lots and lots of choices in the dining hall when I've gone in for lunch.
Yes, and hot and cold choices. It's not just salad bar. There is always a hot entree available that is guaranteed to be vegetarian, but they have been doing more and more vegan cooking as well. I'm a fully vaccinated by WHO approved vaccine. Can I come directly to the residence after arriving in Canada? So the best thing to do would be to connect with the Vice Provost Students Office on that around any rules and regulations for that entry. There is still a period of time where people are advised to self-isolate currently because there is testing requirement when they're entering the country. I think those details are still being worked out in terms of how that intersects with our quarantine program. And so connecting through the Vice Provost students to the contact us section, Bridget should be able to provide some more information. When a student is handed over to central housing, will they have choice or just first available? It will likely be more that it's first available. At the point that we are handing files back, it means that we are fully booked and we don't have any available spaces. And it likely means that other residences are in the same position. It is not likely this year that all New College students will receive an offer from New College, and that's just being very honest. Currently, we have 392 files left, I believe, and we anticipate that there may be about 100 students that we don't have an opportunity to offer to, at least in these first few rounds. And so it could be that that changes later on in the summer, but we would not want to withhold from anybody the opportunity to secure their housing on the off chance that we have a few people who vacate their spaces. Does a residence guarantee mean that I will be allotted a place in New College? It does not. So residence guarantee is, housing guarantee is coming from the University of Toronto, not from New College. And so what that means is that U of T is guaranteeing that you will be offered a space in a U of T run residence, but not necessarily that you get your first choice residence or that you would get your home college. And so all of those housing guarantees will be fulfilled, but they will not, as I said, be necessarily with us. And is there a noise level policy in the residences? So we do have quiet hours, and those are again outlined in the code of behavior. However, we do also expect that everybody is being respectful of the fact that they are living in a shared environment, and that does mean that there are different expectations around noise policies. That doesn't mean it'll be quiet all the time. And I think it's really important for students to remember that people are also living their life, and it's not a library, and there's definitely an expected level of noise, particularly in the middle of the day. However, we also expect that people are kind and considerate to their neighbors and not being loud all the time. I would say my experience with new college residents in particular is that it generally is actually pretty quiet. And so I would say I don't think we have a lot of issues and challenges with noise, but that if somebody is experiencing a challenge with noise, the best first stop is to speak to their residence Dawn, who can work with them and their neighbors to come up with a amicable solution for everyone. If you need a single room for medical reasons, who should you contact? That would be through the accessibility services. And so the student would need to do a registration through accessibility services, at which point they would provide to us guidance on how to best support the medical needs. They don't disclose any information to us about the medical needs. What they provide to us is just the list of accommodations. We do not take any medical documentation on site. That would include any medical documentation on vaccination status. So it's really important in those cases to use the appropriate resources. And could you please repeat the direct arrival to residence after a student is vaccinated? So students will not be at this point expected to direct arrive to residence if they are vaccinated. What they would need to do in this moment is to connect with the Vice Provost Students Office to speak to them about what the updates are, because as of right now, there has not been a modification to our quarantine requirements, and I think any information about that would be upcoming. Some of that will also be after vaccination status has been confirmed, that the university would send out more information about what next steps students can anticipate in their arrival to campus.
Yeah, and I think the other piece, Leah, is that we're expecting that between now and September, there's going to be modifications to a whole range of things related to COVID and quarantine requirements and vaccination requirements and that kind of thing. The other pieces, and thanks, Leah, for mentioning the accessibility services piece, I've dropped into the chat. And just a reminder, if any of these links are things that you want access to, you should copy them now, because you won't have access to them the chat afterwards. But the accessibility services, I've provided a link there. Accessibility services is a service available for students who may have a range of health, chronic health, or learning disabilities. They also provide temporary accommodations for students if they have a temporary illness. And essentially, when students register with accessibility services, their registration, they fill out a part of it, which is sort of demographic information. And then the other part is filled out by their medical practitioner. And when they register with accessibility services, a range of accommodations are put in place. And usually the accommodations, the most common ones, are an extension of time on coursework, sometimes an extension of time on extended time on exams, and often writing exams at what's called our test and exam center. So lots of exams are in places that are, hundreds of students. And for some students who are registered with accessibility services, they may have an opportunity to write their exam in what's called a distraction reduced environment. So I really encourage students who are eligible to register with accessibility services as early as possible. Sometimes students use their accommodations, sometimes they don't, but the best thing is to be able to have them in place.
Okay, and I see two more questions here. So are small appliances allowed in residence rooms? The answer is no. Small appliances are not permitted to be used in residence rooms. However, some students choose to bring a kettle or a toaster or something like that to use in the common room. That would be fine, but there are no appliances that are permitted to be used in individual residence rooms. What is suggested to make beds more comfortable? Students may wish to bring things like a mattress pad or something along those lines. However, it's really important to note that mattresses are not permitted to be brought into residence, and that is part of the bed bug control issue. And so students are not permitted to bring their own mattress. They do have to use the one that is provided in the room, but may wish to bring something like a mattress topper or other things to make that more comfortable and to their taste. And then the last question here, what are the policies towards smoking and vaping in rooms? This is actually a very simple one. The U of T is a smoke-free campus, so it actually is beyond just the residence rooms. It is the entire campus grounds, which includes places like our quads and does include things like vaping. And so anybody who wishes to smoke must do so off of the university property. And if not, then there are consequences associated with that. Small rice cookers are not allowed in the room, so that would be considered an appliance, which is not to be permitted in the room, but you could use that in a common room kitchen. And our beds twins or twin XL. For anybody who is probably 6'4" or taller, the best thing to do would be to contact Nikki at new.orsal and to let her know. We actually do have extra long beds that we can put into rooms for folks who are taller. And so that would just be send us a request and we'll make sure that that is put in. And does each room have Ethernet or Wi-Fi? They actually have access to both. And so there is an intranet system through the residence that does mean if you have a computer with an Ethernet port, which is less and less common now, but there is Ethernet available through the room. The buildings are also fully Wi-Fi accessible through the U of T's Wi-Fi service. And so once students have done the process of confirming their UTOR ID and T card, they would have access to the Wi-Fi, and it's the same Wi-Fi that would be used in classrooms and across campus. All right, so since we are over time, can wrap it up for now. But again, if anybody has questions, to feel free to connect with us through any of the links provided. And once again, I'm just going to quickly put the COVID-19 guidance information there. The Vice Provost students' FAQs are probably the best place to get the most up-to-date information. And again, they do have a option to email somebody directly who will then look into your question if you have something very specific that you're asking about. And if there's any particular questions in regard to the registrar's office or residence accommodations or student life accommodations when people are arriving, please contact our respective teams and we are happy to support you throughout the summer.
And the other thing is there's still lots more events that are going to be happening over this summer. So we've got a roundtable discussion that coming up today for students. There's ongoing, as mentioned, those course enrollment sessions, the Ask an Advisor sessions. We've got mock lectures coming up, a couple of sessions around academic support. So really just want to make sure that you guys encourage your students to be able to connect with those resources, and then of course students can come in virtually and meet with an advisor in a one-on-one setting. And thanks so much for joining us and your great questions this morning too.
All right, so we hope that all of you enjoy the rest of your day, or for those of you who are coming to us from across the globe, that you have a lovely evening. And we look forward to seeing you all on campus, hopefully very soon. Stay safe this summer, and we're looking forward to fall.
Thanks again, everybody.